Welcome to another edition of WVD Monthly, presented by XenTegra, with your host Andy Whiteside and Pete Downing, your source for all things Azure and Microsoft WVD.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 5 of WVD Monthly. I'm your host, Andy Whiteside. I've got with me Pete Downing, the Chief Marketing and Technology Officer for XenTegra. I guess in this podcast, Pete, you do a little of both, right? Marketing and technology all at the same time.
Yeah, I do. It's been a fun year. So thanks for having me, Andy.
Yeah, you sound a little under the weather. You doing all right?
No, I'm doing all right. Just coming off the holidays and, you know, the I guess the hangover, the holiday hangover, you know, from hanging out and having a good time all weekend. So,
yeah, I'll say something here. I've been telling people. So I had a good holiday. I spent a lot of time with my family. I have 4 kids and a wife and a dog and in-laws. Last night I had to run to the grocery store by myself, and I literally sat in the car for a couple minutes just by myself to decompress before I went to the grocery store. That's when I realized that, hey, this has been great. At the same time, you got to have a moment for yourself after 5 days with other people all the time.
Yeah, amen to that. I agree.
All right. Well, our goal today is to talk about what's new in Windows Virtual Desktop. We were talking about it just a minute ago. There's a ton of stuff, it looks like. So I guess we'll jump in with this is from November 2020. Is that the official thread we're looking at for this one?
Yeah, but it's odd. They always tail about a month behind. So even though it's November, they post it in December, which I guess I don't understand that, but that's Microsoft, I guess. So
they can do whatever they want. They're big enough. November 2020. So the first one that's listed here is Azure Portal Experience. There's a couple bullets there. Do you want to just kind of go over what that is? I'm not expecting that to be earth shattering, but might as well cover it while we got it up.
Yeah, that's again, because the Azure Portal Experience is part of the Azure Resource Manager, aka ARM, Microsoft continues to fix, little, call them idiosyncrasies, bugs, if you want to call them that, in the UI, so that they fixed a couple, minor, what I'll call minor things, within the UI to make it, more easier for the users to navigate and obviously fix any issues. And I've actually seen this first one where the friendly name is no longer overwritten on the add VM workflow. I've seen that issue. And then the session host tab will now load if a session hosts are part of scale sets. That's a new feature, and that's part of like them building this into the future of WVD, which I'll talk a little roadmap towards the end.
I had a customer say to me the other day, they liked they understood what Microsoft was doing as far as licensing and, making Microsoft licenses part of your subscription, whether we're talking, Azure for WVD or just Azure in general. But then they alluded several times to the maturity of the AWS platform. Are these bugs that we're talking about here, are those examples of, the ARM scenario just being an evolution, a work in progress?
I think let's separate. There's WVD, what I call pure bugs, and then there's ARM, ARM bugs. And I would say ARM is actually fairly, robust and mature. I think, where you're seeing issues is if they create a new feature within the ARM portal, then they're constantly ironing out some of the issues. And I think Azure, the platform, is very robust and mature. As they launch new functionality and features, Microsoft, obviously will hit bugs. I mean, that's what keeps us gainfully employed, right? We have to constantly fix issues and consult with our clients. And when I was a product manager, that's what kept me employed as a product manager for a long time. So,
yeah. I guess the nice thing is with SaaS related or PaaS or other cloud technologies, at least the fixes come quick and often versus the old days when you waited for the next service pack to come out to address something.
Yeah, and that's the benefit, right? So you and I remember the old days of, Metaframe and presentation server. You'd sometimes wait 6 months to a year for a fix. Nowadays, you see it sometimes turn around in a month. Worst case, maybe 3 months. So that's the great thing about PaaS, SaaS, infrastructure as a service, et cetera, is that they're constantly improving the platform.
Yeah. All right. Well, next item listed here is FS Logix. Our old friends at FS Logix, client version 2009. I guess that means September of 2020. Is that what 2009 means here?
Yeah, they moved to the same naming schema that the whole Microsoft product line has, and behind the scenes there's a long version number. It's 2.97621, and then a build number, I assume, which is 3127. The big thing here is they brought on better support for Windows 7 and later. They just continue to enhance, the support for various versions of Windows, Windows 10 multi-session mode. But really, this is focused on bug fixes. I mean, I'll include a link in the podcast, but there's a ton of bug fix that they've done in FS Logix. And what's good about this, it shows that Microsoft is committed to the evolution of maintaining FS Logix and building it into the overall platform. I think in early 2021, we'll see functionality of FS Logix built into the ARM platform, which will be nice, because then you don't have to, you don't have to go and install it out of band. You won't have to go and configure it out of band. You can just configure it right in the ARM platform. And then I also, again, I'm hypothesizing here. I think you'll see it built into the operating system at some point. So those are things that, just based on what I'm seeing, I'm really excited. I really like FS Logix. I think it's a great way to take your profile, containerize it, and make it more portable is, the term I like to use.
So without FS Logix in the Microsoft stack, the concept of non-persistent, where machines reboot back to a gold image, that would either be impossible or much more difficult, right?
Yeah, correct. Because all it's doing is taking % user profile %. So when you log onto your profile, do % user profile %. It's taking that folder and putting it into a VHD, and then taking that virtual hard drive and storing it somewhere central, whether it's Azure Files, NetApp Azure Files, or a file server that you put up in infrastructure as a service. It stores it centrally. Now, what's cool about this is you can do that on-prem as well. So yeah, it's a great solution to take the profile contents and put it into central storage. But then what's great, but you'll still need, like for example, at the bare minimum of GPO, you might need, VMware's, WEM tools, workspace environment management tools, Citrix's workspace environment management tools, AppSense, aka Avanti. So you still need environment management tools if you want to manipulate the experience. But what FS Logix does is they take the profile, put it in a virtual hard drive, and store it centrally, which is beautiful.
And one of the big use cases for that is your cache file with a product like Outlook, right?
Yeah, and that's the other cool thing it does. So FS Logix can take your profile contents, put it in one VHD, take your OST file and put it in another VHD. So let's say, for example, you have to put your OST file on encrypted storage, but you don't care about your profile, right? You could do that. Or you could just separate them out because you want to have quotas for different quotas. As another example, right? So that, you can separate out the Office contents as well into a separate VHD, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. I guess if people want to learn more about FS Logix, they could check out some of your YouTube channel recordings. You've got at least one or two on FS Logix over the last couple of years, right?
Yeah, and I do my monthly WVD workshop, which I'll continue into 2021. I'm actually switching it up in January, and I'm going to do an Azure fundamentals workshop because a bunch of people asked me for that. So I listened to my customers, clients, and prospects, and I'm going to bring that back in January, and then I'll bring the WVD one back in February. So I always try to cover that. And then January 13th, on my webinar on Wednesday, I'm actually inviting Rob Shaw, who's one of the black belts for FS Logix. We're going to talk about all the new stuff that's been going on with WVD. So I'm pretty excited about that.
All right. Next one here is the RDP, so Remote Display Protocol, Short Path Public Preview. What in the world is that?
All right, so let's put it in Citrix speak. So you remember, HDX Direct Connect, and making the path between your ICA client and the VDA the most direct path.
Oh, yes.
It's basically the same thing. So basically what this is doing is taking the RDP connection between your client in the target desktop and making it the shortest path possible. Now, there's a little asterisk here. There's some requirements, and the basic requirements are, you have to have some type of express route. You have to have some type of site-to-site, VPN, IPsec base, some type of point-to-point, or a public IP address assignment to the VMs. So there is some basic requirements that you have to meet, but what this solves is that kind of, we'll call hairpinning, right? So, you might be, sitting, connecting from a client in your data center, and you don't want to have to hairpin across out to the internet and then back across the express. You basically want to have the most direct path possible to the RDP, the remote desktop in the back end. So that's what this does. That's what this solves. I was reading through this over the last week, and what's interesting about it is it's still very, I'll call it manual, but it definitely does work. And there's a lot of configuration you have to do behind the scenes to get it to work. But once you get it set up, it does work. And I've been trying to test it in my own environment, but I'll dig into that over the next couple of weeks. But I'm excited about this because, again, this makes the user experience better, and that's the best way to summarize it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would love to see some type of drawing a workflow of how it goes with and without this, but more to come, I guess. Maybe I should attend one of the workshops.
Yeah, and this is one of those things that here I'll put I know the users can't see this. I'll put a link for you, Andy, in the chat window, but I'll include a link in our summary of the podcast as well, so users can check it out and read up on it. There's a cool little diagram in the documentation. It explains the what if without it, and then what happens when you have it. So essentially what this does is, again, solves the usability around latency and gives the user a better experience. Also, what it does is allows you, if you have any kind of any type of throttling or bandwidth monitoring or anything like that, it allows you to do that as well. So that's the other big bonus as well, is it allows you to monitor and manage that traffic. So
yeah, I'll definitely be checking out that link and maybe watching some videos after this. Next item here, it says az.desktop virtualization version 2.0.1. I love my Microsoft world, but that's cryptic. What in the world is this?
So I guess the best way to summarize it, it's just an update to their PowerShell commandlets for Windows Virtual Desktop. And the biggest thing that they included is the ability to do MSIX app attach inside of PowerShell. So before, that whole commandlet library you had to install separately. Now it's all part of the commandlet library. So essentially, this is just a continuation of updating the PowerShell. AZ is the Azure library, and then dot virtualization signifies WVD. So they're going to continue to update the WVD commandlets and enhance it. Eventually, I think you'll see some FS logics in here, and anything they do in the ARM portal, you should hopefully see a PowerShell aligning PowerShell commandlet. So that's the evolution of this. So you'll see a 2.0.2 at some point, I'm going to guess, and maybe a 3.0, next year at some point. So yeah, this is just the evolution of the commandlets for PowerShell.
Yeah, had I read ahead and saw the word PowerShell, it would have all made sense. At first, I was thinking they had desktops in Arizona or something.
Yeah, yeah, true.
I still to this day long to be a PowerShell guru, scripter. Maybe I'll do that in my retirement someday, is to pick that up as a fun hobby, right?
Yeah. It's funny. I actually enjoy PowerShell, but it's like you. I find that my tech, the ability to dive into tech, gets a little less each year, and as we get more, you and I get more involved with kind of running the business. But I try to keep my hands dirty as much as I can. So.
Yep. That's all you can do, right? Just stay acquainted with the technology and use it as much as you can, and build upon what you know and try to relearn what you forgot. Next section here talks about Azure Advisor updates. What do we have? What is that?
Yeah, so the Azure Advisor, is one of those things when you log in. I don't know the last time you logged into your ARM portal, but it will pop up and say, "Hey, we have some recommendations for you." And essentially, what this does is helps you, understand where you could optimize performance, you could save money, et cetera. And so what they've done is they've continued to enhance this for Windows Virtual Desktop, and more importantly, optimizing performance in a depth first load balancing scenario. And so, you have breadth and depth. Breadth and is going to allow you to, it spreads the load evenly. Depth allows you to fill the virtual machine before you go to another one. And so if you're very cost conscious, which a lot of our clients are, typically what I recommend is you try, you go breadth first, you figure out your core, your users per density, right? Your users per virtual CPU density. And then you go depth, because then that allows you to save money. So you can say, hey, I know that if I spin this virtual machine up, I can get, let's say 80 users on it, but once I hit 60, I'm going to power up another one, and then so on and so forth. That's kind of more the depth model, right? The breadth is, hey, I got 3 virtual machines. I'm gonna load balance the users across no matter what. I'm always going to have those 3 up and running, and if I need another one, I might power on another one, et cetera, et cetera. So the advisor is just going to allow you to, give you better recommendations, and that's all it does. Is it says, hey, Andy, here's some recommendations. You can choose to take them or not, but here's what we recommend to help you save money, or tweak this to get better performance, or tweak that to get better performance. So it's, Microsoft trying to help you.
Right. Yeah. And that's, as much as we, going back to the previous one, want to be awesome PowerShell scripting gurus, these days, understanding the cost constraints and the challenges with running a data center in the cloud where the meter's always running, and we have to control that, is probably just as important versus the old days where you just bought some gear and cranked it up, right?
Yeah, exactly. Cool.
Well, Pete, that's all that Microsoft has in this document as far as updates. Are there any other things that are happening in the WVD world that you think people should know about?
Yeah, so I as part of our segment, I always try to look at the roadmap to see if there's anything interesting. And again, I include a link to the roadmap in our podcast summary. But again, I'm looking out into the future. I can't guarantee that this is going to happen because it's a roadmap. But Microsoft says they're going to have a migration tool in January. So a lot of people, I know I got a few clients of mine that are waiting for this, a non-ARM. So the original rollout of WVD to ARM-based. So I still have clients who are on the original non-ARM version of WVD. So we'll try to help them get migrated, hopefully in 2021. They're going to continue to enhance, latency. So continue to enhance different data centers across the world. But the big one that sticks out to me here that I'm waiting for, and they say it's in February, is the ability to enable deallocated VMs to start automatically when a user connects. So again, as you and I know, cost is a big factor in cloud, and the best way to save money is not to keep virtual machines powered on when you don't need them. And so, VMware or Microsoft's going to have the ability to scale up and scale down automatically. So I imagine they're going to finally have support for scale sets. Right now you can do it, but you have to use what's called a logic app with runbooks, et cetera. It's pretty involved, and it works. But again, it's not built into the platform. It's not tied into the platform. So that's the feature I'm really looking forward to see what happens and what they're going to launch. And I'm going to probably bring that up in my webinar with Rob in January to see when we can expect that.
So, Pete, the only way to keep the meter from running, right, is to actually deallocate it. Just powering one off is not enough, right? You got to deallocate it? Yeah,
you got to deallocate it. And, so if you go into the OS and say shut down, you're still going to be spending money. In your ARM portal, it's got to be stopped and then say deallocated in parentheses to not be spending money on compute. You're still going to be consuming storage, but at that point, it's pennies on the dollar for storage. Yep. So to answer your question, yep.
And so you're thinking that Microsoft's going to be kind to us and allow us to deallocate intelligently and reallocate intelligently, and that's going to be built into the system. That's what you think or hope is coming.
Yeah, that's what I hope. And like I said, right now that is supported, but it's through a Logic app, and you got to build a run book, and it's pretty involved. And I've personally helped 2 clients build one, and they can get pretty clunky, especially if you got to get very specific with the VM type and things like that, where once scale sets are supported, it's just going to work. And again, once this feature comes out, it'll be very interesting to see how some of the ecosystem partners adapt, because I know there's a couple ecosystem partners who have features that already do this. The question is, will they still be relevant once they get to this point? It's amazing to see what Microsoft has done in a year, to be frank. So.
Yeah, you and I talk about it all the time. It's one thing for Citrix to be worried about Microsoft making inroads, at least in the desktop brokering solution as it relates to Azure. But some of those other players that have created solutions specifically for WVD, and Microsoft keeps knocking out those features, that's got to be scary for those guys.
Yeah. So, well, cool, man. Well, yeah, so that's all the updates I have on my side, but I'm going to say this, I'll end on this, but I think 2021 is going to be a good year for WVD. I think we'll see it go from kind of being how do I use WVD to I want to use WVD, and then tying in a Citrix or even a VMware to enhance it further. And again, I encourage all the listeners to check out events.XenTegra.com. We're constantly doing great events to help show how we tie into the Microsoft story.
So here's 2 questions for you, and try to answer them as succinctly as you can. Will WVD be the number 1 desktop brokering solution on the planet at some point in the future?
That's a good question. I'll say possibly yes, from a platform and hardware point of view, but maybe no from a protocol point of view. And I'll just leave it at that.
Okay. So they would be using other. Okay. So for brokering and platform, it was a maybe yes, maybe definitely.
Yep.
A yes. Would you be willing to predict? I mean, it's the end of the year. This is when resolutions and predictions start coming out. You want to go on a limb and say when that's going to be?
I'll say 2022. We'll see Microsoft kind of become the leader in brokering, and yeah, I think by 2022 we'll start seeing Microsoft become more and more relevant.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that was actually much quicker than I thought you were going to say. So we'll see if that turns out to be aggressive, or I can't imagine it's anything other than aggressive. But if that does happen, that'll be a big shakeup in the next 24 months. We'll see.
Yep. Yeah.
But you also think the VMwares of the world and the Citrixes of the world will still be playing in that space with them. They just won't be controlling it the way they have for the last Citrix, at least the last 20 years.
No, it again, for Citrix and VMware, it's not about necessarily the underlying platform. It's about the protocol and the display layer, right? So what the user sees. Do I think the RDP and the RD client will become mature enough to be utilized? Yes, but if you're a legacy, Citrix and VMware customer, it's going to be very hard to go to that experience. And let's face it, VMware and Citrix have both worked very hard to mature their protocols over the last 20 years. So in Citrix, 30 years, right? So I just find it hard to see a robust protocol like the ICA protocol or the Blast Extreme protocol to just go defunct, right? I think at some point Microsoft's going to come out and say, hey, we prefer these 4 protocols or these 2 protocols, and call it the day, right?
So you're really saying you expect Microsoft Azure as a hosting platform under the WVD moniker being the primary player at the end of maybe 2022, but those players like Citrix and VMware will still be in the mix with the brokering and provisioning, maybe lesser on the provisioning side, but brokering and connectivity piece? Yeah.
Because again, it's going to be it's very hard to keep up with what they're doing, and who knows, maybe one of them gets acquired at some point. It's been the story over the last our whole careers, right? VMware and Microsoft goes after Citrix and buys Citrix or buys VMware. I don't know, who knows? So.
All right. Well, with that, I'll let you go and get back to. Appreciate you joining. The listeners don't realize, but you're on vacation today, so we'll let you get back to it. And I'm sure people in my household are starting to look for me too. So enjoy the rest of your evening, and we'll do it again in a month.
Yeah. Good. Thanks for having me, Andy, and I can't wait.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to another edition of WVD Monthly, presented by XenTegra, with your host Andy Whiteside and Pete Downing. Thanks to podcast episode guests. Podcast produced by Pete Downing. If you are interested in joining a XenTegra podcast, email info@xentegra.com. Podcast copyrighted by XenTegra LLC.